And I think we're live. I've got the live little red button in the top left-hand corner, Monica. So I think that's it. I think we're live. Thanks everybody who's joined us so far. I'm sure we'll have some people who join over the next couple of minutes or so. But my name's Danny from Thrive. This session, thankfully, is not about me. I am joined by the lovely Monica, who has kindly agreed to take us through her journey of procuring the right learning management system at Leeds Building Society, how they launched, and tips on how to show the impact of learning across the business as well. We are promising to keep you for no longer than 30 minutes. One, because of your time, but two, because we have been having some technical difficulties, even just getting onto this session today. So hopefully the tech lasts at least 30 minutes for us. But like I say, this session is not about me. Monica, thanks for obviously joining us. And I think it'd be good if you could just tell us a little bit about Leeds Building Society and your role.
Talking about technical, I've lost Danny.
No, she's lost me already. We have got a little switch on. If Monica loses me, there is somebody in the background who's going to switch me out and then put me back in again, and she should be able to see me. And now, can you see me again, Monica? Perfect. I'll go again. Do you want to introduce Leeds Building Society and your role across the organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. So Leeds Building Society is one of 42 building societies across the UK. What that means is we are member owned, so we don't have shareholders, and we focus on providing mortgages and savings for our customers. Really exciting. It's our 150th year this year. So, that means we've been around for a really, really long time and fantastic for the society. We are a purpose-led organisation, and our purpose is to put home ownership within reach of more people, generation after generation. And we're incredibly proud to support first-time buyers, giving them a place to belong. So in terms of the society, we have around 1,800 colleagues at the moment, spread between 2 offices and 50 branches across the UK. So that's the society in a bit of a nutshell. In terms of my role, I'm responsible for designing and delivering engaging learning experiences that inspire our colleagues to build their skills and to thrive, while making sure that the learning systems that we have and the learning ecosystem supports that journey. So all the good stuff around learning, skills, getting people ready for their role, moving within their role is the stuff that falls within my remit.
Amazing. Exciting role, I would say.
Very, very exciting. Yeah,
Everything
absolutely exciting.
And we want to make this session as useful as possible. As I mentioned, Monica has kindly offered to go through that whole journey from kind of start of the project all the way through to where they are now. We would love to take your questions. So anybody who's joined, if you've got any questions for Monica, add them into the chat and I will try and man the chat and the comments as best as I can. We do have a couple of slides to show. It is not death by PowerPoint, don't worry. We just wanted to make this as useful as possible for the people joining, essentially. So first question that I've got for you, Monica, until we start getting some through the chat is, I first spoke with you back in September 2022, which feels like a long time ago now, about your LMS project in general that you were just venturing into. I will share my screen in a second. Could you tell us a bit more about how the LMS project came about and why you originally went to market? And I will start to share my screen as well now.
Yeah, absolutely. So like any organisation, we had an existing LMS, which we'd had within the society for quite a substantial amount of time. But what we were kind of getting increasingly from our colleagues was that they were getting quite critical around the kind of the learning engagement that they was getting. What we was hearing was the ease of access to relevant content across all devices. Our branches in particular struggled with access to learning at a time when you're starting to see more bite-sized learning. We didn't have the availability of bite-sized learning on demand. And what was quite crucial was, although we could assign learning to colleagues, once they'd completed it, it would need to be reassigned to them. So from an admin perspective, a learner engagement perspective, that made that whole journey quite clunky for them. Don't get me wrong, there were some good things about the solution that we had in place. We had really, really good reporting in there. You could see what was being assigned. But when you're thinking about it from a learning perspective, you want something end to end that's going to be applicable for all our colleagues. So at that point, we were coming to the end of our kind of tenure with that existing one, which was prime opportunity to start thinking, what do we need now and for the future, especially when colleagues are kind of quite critical about the existing. And because we're purpose-led and we were wanting to move forward with learning, we needed to look for an alternative solution. We needed to look for a solution that would enable us to personalise learning, give colleagues learning on demand to access it when and where they wanted to, and also something very different and something exciting. So we started going to market. We started to have a little look about what was out there and casting that net.
Nice. I know you cast quite a wide net
Oh.
originally as well, Monica. I know you looked at lots of different platforms initially and went through quite a rigorous procurement process. I guess taking a step back from that initial question, because this comes up a lot when I'm speaking with people and people who are looking at similar projects like this. How did you align key stakeholders across the business initially to get approval to go out to market?
So we're in a position where we're quite lucky. We look after the budget for our learning systems. So in terms of getting somebody on board, we didn't have to kind of go through that budget expectation one where you'd have to put business case through to get budget. We were in that luxurious position that we had it. But within any organisation, when you are making a change that's going to impact all colleagues, you have to do that at the right time for the right reasons. And what was happening at that point when we was going to market is we were heading into a business transformation program, which was fundamentally changing our core banking systems. So as you can imagine, that is a huge, huge project. So we had to balance the need of wanting to make sure we had the right learning system, because even if you're moving into a transformation program, you need to make sure that you can still train the people in the right way and have the right solutions. So actually they kind of become jointly aligned into where you want to go for the future. So in a way that kind of helped us from getting stakeholders on board. So we started small. We started to engage the right people from a people perspective, the right people in IT, and go through the RFP process in a smaller way, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a moment, before actually kind of going big bang and getting engagement. So we started small with our engagement and then went bigger and wider when we did a proof of concept and proved that it was the right thing to do for us as an organisation in line with everything else that was happening.
Nice. And it sounds like you went through that process in quite a really nice way. But for anybody else on the call who might be just about to go through the same process or is in the same process right now, what would you say is there anything you'd change that you did back then? Or what was the biggest challenge in terms of getting key stakeholders or sign off on board initially?
So I don't suppose we'll change a great deal, because I think I feel like we found the magic way of working, and I think the way that we did it, we knew it was a good way because the colleagues that we've used through the proof of concept have been used for other projects. So just to kind of wind backwards and talk through what we did. So the whole RFP process, we were very, very clear from the onset of what our requirements were for what we needed from a new solution. So we used Moscow, which is used quite a lot widely. And I think from a tool that's really, really good. What must the solution have? What should we have? All of those really, really kind of good things that stand in good stead from an RFP process. So what we wanted to do was to prove the concept. We made the decision to run a small pilot with a group of diverse colleagues from across the whole of the society, including the branch network, where we knew notoriously that they had difficulty getting access to learning. We had managers, new colleagues, everybody going through this kind of a whole process to demonstrate that the solution was the right thing. And we made it very, very clear what our outcomes were wanting to be. So we wanted to have the engagement for leaders and colleagues. We wanted to make sure that from an admin perspective, we reduced the costs. We wanted to make sure that the new solution was on par with budget requirements, and also from our colleague strategy that it was all aligned. And we kept through all of that all the way. I think what becomes difficult for bringing new solutions in is when you start to change the goalposts and you start with this and you end up with this. And that can kind of create an absolute minefield. And we didn't do that. Keeping it simple, keeping true to what your requirements were was something that, I think stood us in good stead for us to get through the proof of concept and then move into the full launch.
Got you. And timing that you mentioned launch, we've got Andrea in the chat who has asked, have you any top tips in terms of a successful launch of a new LMS? And Andrea, we will come to that in a second. We've got another slide all on the launch in a second. In terms of, and this probably fits into this as well, actually, Monica, but in terms of that implementation, so you've gone through the procurement process, you've chosen Thrive as your preferred partner, and we're now moving into the implementation stages. Can you describe that implementation journey? What worked really well? What might have taken you by surprise? Anything that you would change again if you were to go through that process again right now, for example?
So I think the thing is with you as a solution, you make that journey really easy for us. So you have a tried and tested formula for implementation, and I think you've proved that works, and it does work. Following that process. So working with the project manager Beth was fantastic. Working with JP to help us to navigate that whole implementation process. So once we'd made the decision, what we were really keen to do was make sure that we had the right people around the table at the right time.
Yeah.
So we got infrastructure on board. And the reason for that was with any new solution coming in, sometimes you think it's this, and actually it might not be that, it might be something smaller. So having them right on board from the beginning was an absolute win. So they could say, actually, you just want single sign-on. That's easy. That's not a difficult thing to do. But having that process where you normally have the 12 weeks, step-by-step stages where you go through some training, you build your solution, you can do it in 12 weeks or you can do it in less. That really makes for a successful implementation even before you launch something. So my advice would be just listen to the experts. We had a solution in place for over 10 years. So you can imagine the amount of data that we had from a learning perspective in the solution. You can imagine the amount of learning that we already had. So what you've got to do is you've got to be brutal, and you've got to think about how much does the actual colleague need in a new solution. And we made the decision, we only needed 1 year's worth of learning history, because the rest of it could be put in a data lake, a data solution somewhere off platform, because the colleagues don't need that. We need it from a financial services reporting, but colleagues don't need it. So just listening as to the implementation specialist within Thrive really supports with creating a successful implementation. And I couldn't have asked for anything more from that whole process. You just made it so much easier for us.
Nice. It's nice to know that we're doing it right after all these years. And you touched on the migration there. I think migration is one of the biggest fears when I'm speaking with people who are looking to migrate from an existing legacy platform over to a new solution like Thrive. Obviously, we've migrated hundreds of customers now across to Thrive. What was your migration process like? Because like you say, you had an existing system for over 10 years.
So it was fairly simple. I think, what we did was we looked at how long the data was. We looked at our regulatory requirements. What is it that we have to have as a minimum? So what do we need to bring across? And we felt it was an ideal time to do some housekeeping from a content perspective, because you want this new solution to look very, very different. So we kind of use the concept bank the content, because it's perfect. It does what it needs to do. We want it on the new solution. Build something so it's there or thereabouts. Let's bring it across. Or do you know what? Just bin it. It's outdated. It's not in line with how Thrive looked from a bite-sized perspective. So from a whole housekeeping, we did a huge piece of what do we want to bring across, and we were quite brutal. If colleagues are not engaging with it, why bring it? We can start again.
Yeah, perfect. And you're right. I think at the start it's a bit of a fear or a big challenge that
Minefield.
people think, and then actually it's quite a nice point to just press the reset button,
Yeah.
start again, clean things up, start from fresh. So
Yeah.
yeah, completely agree with you on that. And then we're coming back to Andrea's question here around tips on a successful launch of an LMS. And again, I'll share my screen, but obviously you launched to almost 2,000 people across the organization. You've seen some incredible engagement across the board, which is still continuing today. But I know that first month, 2 months, and 3 months was a huge success for you. How did you go about launching it, and what tips would you share to anyone? And I'll share my screen again for
So
you.
I think running the proof of concept really helped us with thinking about how we were going to kind of do that whole launch campaign. So we started our launch campaign about 4 weeks before we actually made it live. So we worked with yourselves, your design team, and had a nice little video created for us, which was just a 60-second bite size under the concept A New Way to Learn. So that video was high impact, really, really engaging. This is what learning is going to bring. And we supported that with an infographic. And the timing that we launched, we were quite savvy in terms of we aligned it to our performance cycle. So we launched about March time, when a point where colleagues were starting to think about their development. So they'd already set their objectives for the year, but they were starting to think about what development do you need to support you now and for the future. So have a think about that. Hold that thought, because in about a month's time, you're going to have somewhere where you can put that learning and you can add your goals. So we started to create a bit of a kind of a momentum month out. We then dropped something in 3 weeks later. So what we did with that one is, because we had colleagues going through a proof of concept with us, what we did was we wanted to demonstrate that it wasn't built by the people team. It was built with colleagues in mind, and it was built by our colleagues. So the next bit was built together. So we had some real nice bite-sized videos in there for colleagues that were part of the proof of concept. We listed those colleagues to demonstrate, they were from across the organization, all different levels. And they were really kind of just giving their spin on what they really thought about it, which landed really, really well. And then 2 weeks out, we did another infographic, which was, these are the top 10 things we absolutely love about Thrive platform. So the things that you'll see differently, you'll get bite-sized learning, there'll be pathways, you can add your goals on there, and guess what, when you add a goal, it will recommend learning to you. How fantastic is that? For managers out there, you'll get access to way more reporting than you've ever had in the past. And something we always struggled with as an organisation was continuous professional development for colleagues in regulatory roles. So, we shouted about that. And then we hit launch day. So it was a case of, it's here, here's some, little verbatim comments from everybody, here's a video, and here's a pathway that you can get straight on, here's some, 30-second videos to show you how to use Thrive, and that was launched. So we had that nice routine of building the momentum and creating some really nice user case stories before the big bang. And yeah, we had some amazing engagement within kind of the first week and the first month, which was quite phenomenal for us.
Amazing. Oh, I've got other bits on it. And in terms of how you're maintaining that engagement, even now, could you talk a little bit through that?
Yeah, I can do, because it doesn't stop with a launch, does it? You can have a fantastic launch, but you need to keep colleagues coming back for more. So there's a few things that we've done, that we've introduced, that have landed really well with our colleagues. So we've nicked some bears off you and introduced Lenny the Learning Lion, who pops up every now and again. at conferences. Who don't like a gimmick? Let's face it. So, it's nice to have a little gimmick there and it brings it to life. But some of the things from a content perspective that have landed really, really well is the user generated content. So our LBS Unplugged and LBS On Demand are where colleagues in the business do a call like this, a webinar, a Teams meeting for colleagues to join in, and they demystify their role and their business area. And they just bring that to life. So it's just knocking down some of those barriers and really bringing to life some of the things that's happening. And we've also created a newsletter that can go out in Teams, or it can go out via Outlook that gives a direct link back into the platform as well. And, all of those have landed quite well. So we're continuing to see engagement and high volumes of colleagues coming back and, completing the learning and re-engaging with it.
And then the juicy bits. What are some of those
Yeah.
success stories? What's that impact that you've seen since
Yes.
obviously the launch?
So the success stories, I think, speak for themselves. It's been really good with us. The proof of concept group have been used in other projects because they've seen that that's kind of like a nice bit of magic sauce to use for bringing new things into the organisation. We've launched several skills boosting pathways, that move people from a foundational skill level to a practicing skill level. They've landed really, really well. I think the biggest thing, we've seen a massive reduction in queries into the inbox. Past colleagues would have had to ask for learning to be reassigned to them. No more. You can access learning as often and as much as you want to. But the platform's a lot more stable as well. So we're not seeing the issues that we historically had. 70% of our colleagues do have skills profile on Thrive. And when we launched, we made it really, really clear that the more you add into Thrive, the more you get out of it. So if you have your skills in there, guess what? Thrive AI will start recommending learning to you. It's just like having Netflix for learning, isn't it? So that massively helps. And also from a goals perspective, around 65% of our colleagues now have goals on Thrive, which, if you have a content goal on there, it starts to recommend your learning to you again, which is fantastic because it takes some of the legwork out of, thinking about, I want to develop this, but I'm not quite sure what I need to do with it. So it starts to recommend learning to you. And that's landed really, really well. And we're really proud that about 20% of our content is generated not by the people team, but by our colleagues out there that are the subject matter experts in their field, and they are sharing, what they do and how they do it so well.
Yeah, I think they're all unbelievable kind of stats and success stories that, me and Thrive, we're huge fans of that user-generated content element, and we know the impact and the engagement that can drive. I know when we first spoke, even back in 2022, Monica, there was still questions around, we're not quite sure how user-generated content will land. So the fact that now 20% of the content that's on Thrive is generated by end users is incredible as well. So thanks for sharing that. And where we have time, this is flying by. We've got about 7 minutes left until we've promised people that we'll cut off. We do have another question from Sarah in the chat. So Sarah's asking, how did your employees adapt to using a new LMS? What type of training was required, if any?
Oh, it's a great question, Sarah. And I think because the platform itself is so intuitive and so easy to use, we created some really, really quick how-to guides, which were part of the pathway when we launched. We had some videos that were ranging from 15 seconds to 30 seconds on how to use it. We did some drop-in sessions if colleagues wanted that hand-holding kind of experience. So we did many different channels and multiple different things. But the feedback that we got from all colleagues was they absolutely loved it. It was so simple to use compared to our old outdated platform. It almost just managed itself to start off with, which was great.
Nice. I think just adding to that as well for Sarah, one of the latest releases, Kiki, which is our chatbot that sits in the platform, is now directly linked into our trust center where all of our training materials sit. So learners can simply ask a question to the chatbot and it will surface direct answers based on all of the different training materials rather than them having to go into it and read it or watch a video, for example, as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Monica. And then I know you've kindly agreed to share your platform, talk through how you've got it set up, which I think will probably take us to the end of this session. So if there's any other
Great
questions,
timing, Danny. I've lost you.
oh, Monica's lost me, but I'll come back again. But if there's any, have you got me back, Monica?
Yeah.
I was going to say, if there's any questions whilst we're running through this, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll try and cover them all off by the end as well. So I'm going to share my screen, Monica. I'm driving and you're going to talk through it. So you guide me and I will go wherever you need me to go.
Yeah, so this is our homepage. So what we have is we have regular campaigns running, which is a nice big banner across the top. So we have got our Q3 Essential Learning out at the moment. So this is a static banner, but sometimes we do use kind of GIFs. What we then have on the homepage is we have your assigned learning. So that's where your learning is assigned to you. We want that up front and center because it's important. But then what we've done with the homepage is we've tried to make it dynamic and we change it up regularly around what we feel is the right kind of learning based on feedback from colleagues. And we do use kind of filtering quite well on here. So we know that feedback is, colleagues are strapped for time. So, access to bite-sized learning. So we've got the filters around 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If you've got your skills set up, it will kind of show you that based on your skills. Because we are a building society, we're using the financial services skills of the future. So we have those accessible from the homepage as well, which can be filtered based on the skills. And behind each of these is either pathways or items of learning, depending on what they are. So we change this up depending on the campaigns that we're running, what's happening within the society, because if you keep it static, that's where you can lose engagement. So you have to keep it fresh, you have to keep looking at it, you have to keep amending it and just feeding some life into that. And campaigns are a fantastic way to make your platform feel very, very different. But where you've got your kind of static information is in the Explore page. So in our Explore page, we've got set tiles there that are a bit like you're not sure what you're looking for, so you just want to go and explore in them. So we have primary ones, which is like the A to Z, our behaviors, our skills, and it's just another way of just finding learning and searching for it. And Danny, I've lost you again.
It's all right, Rich, me back. I'm back.
I'm back. So that's the Explore page. But if we look at some learning as well, it'll be quite nice to see some pathways. So pathways are landing really, really well within the society. We have some skills boosting pathways. We've got a pathway for new colleagues joining the organisation. And what's really, really clever is in the past, we would have had to assign that ourselves. Now, because of the way audiences and structures are set up in Thrive, once you've set your rules, as soon as a colleague joins the organisation and they click onto the link in Thrive, within a very short period, they've got access to their pathway, which gives them all of the great essential learning that they need to be doing as a new colleague, really kind of gives them, who we are as a society, the purpose, which sessions to be joining on. So pathways are something that we've been spending a lot of time on because they proved to be really, really successful with our colleagues.
Amazing. Good timing as well. We're at 28 minutes past. Are there any other questions from anybody in the chat at all before we ask maybe a couple more just to get us to past? But yeah, we'd love them to come from you. We'll leave it a few seconds to see if anything comes through, Monica. But from your side, in terms of what you're most excited about moving forward in the Thrive platform, might be switching different elements of the system on. It might be something that you've seen in our roadmap. What excites you the most as to what you've seen coming?
So what excites me the most is AI and Kiki. So, we're a building society. We are risk adverse. So we do like to make sure that we check everything before we dip our toes into things. So we are looking at switching the AI tools on and Kiki because, what that's going to bring for our colleagues is just phenomenal. And, the work that you've been doing from an AI perspective is really going to move learning forward, quite significantly. So we are hopefully going to be switching that on very, very soon and really excited to see what that does for our colleagues' learning experiences.
You had any thoughts on whether you're going to keep the name Kiki or are you going to rename it?
Funny you should mention that. We were thinking about doing a competition, but we didn't want anything like Boaty McBoaty or whatever it was that thing was. So it might be key that it stays. So let's watch that space on that one.
Nice. And then finally, if there are no more questions in the chat, if you could give one tip to L&D professionals who have obviously joined the webinar and joined us right until the end, when it comes to driving learner engagement across their organizations, what would that one tip or multiple tips be?
Oh, it's a really hard question, that one, because I think there's so much that we can do. And as learning professionals, we are absolutely passionate, aren't we? And we believe everything that we create is amazing. It's the best thing since sliced bread. We often get a little bit perplexed as to, why we don't get the level of engagement that we'd expect. And I think what's the saying, you can lead a horse to water and all that. So I think for me, it's just making sure that we remember to tie our learning back to real world business impact. I think when learners see how learning matters beyond a learning event, I think engagement just skyrockets. Relevance, fuels motivations. And I think in terms of the impact, it's more sustainable. And I think, what I've learned through Thrive coming in, just be brave and bold when it comes to marketing new and existing learning. Try something different because you may surprise yourself.
Love that. We have one more question in from Laura in the chat. I don't want to miss that out. So Laura's asked, do you also make your own content or do you get everything out of the database of Thrive?
So we do have colleagues internally that are digital creators. So we bring our content from multiple sources. So we do have a Thrive package, but we do have people internally that build content and our user generated content as well. So it does come from many channels and many sources. But we are lucky, we do have a team that can create content internally, which I recognise is not everywhere.
Yeah, you've got some good people creating that
We
content
do. Yeah,
internally, definitely. Perfect. Well, if there are no other questions that come through, I think that's about it. So Monica, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to everyone who joined and followed us right until the end. Apologies about any technical difficulties, but I think we rode that wave pretty well, Monica. She's lost me again as I've said that, so we'll call it there. Thanks everyone for joining.